Why is it so important that we invest in research that looks into extending the life of the layer?
Currently, globally, there's an interest in extending the productive life of the layer hen, which will mean that overall we get perhaps about another 20 weeks of production out of the birds. So that means that the layer flock is replaced less frequently, and overall that can reduce the size of the national flock. In doing that, we need though to be sure that the birds that are being used for this extended layer life are efficient producers, producing good quality eggs for that sustained period of time, and also that the well-being of the hens and their health is appropriate for that longer holding period. And so growers within the Australian egg industry are actually requesting additional further information or management tools or techniques that they potentially could apply so that they're able to generate flocks of birds that are appropriate for being held through to this very late lay stage.
What are some of the challenges currently faced by industry in extending the life of their layer flocks?
There's a tendency amongst the Australian egg industry to have birds that are perhaps a little bit larger than the breed standard bird. These birds, right from point of lay, tend to consume more feed. They're heavier, but particularly they tend to lay larger eggs. And then as they age, the size of the egg continues to increase. And with that increased size of egg, the shell tends to become thinner, and so the eggs are much more susceptible to cracking. The eggshells are much more susceptible to cracking and breaking. So that's lost production for the grower. As well, there's concerns about bird health. Australian studies have also identified that these slightly larger birds tend to have a lower feed efficiency level, but then particularly as they age, there tends to be an increased incidence of fatty liver hemorrhagic syndrome, and also their bone strength tends to be compromised somewhat. So that's also compared to slightly lighter birds, where the lighter bird, and Dr Greg Parkinson has demonstrated some really interesting work here. The lighter bird, while laying slightly smaller eggs, tends to have a better persistency of lay and overall level of production, and less susceptible to conditions like fatty liver hemorrhagic syndrome. Their bone strength tends to be that bit better as the birds age. And also the egg quality, the shell quality in particular, tends not to decline as rapidly with those slightly smaller sized birds.
Why is this research using birds from rearing rather than from the point of lay?
In these previous studies, like the feed efficiency study of Dr Cormac O'Shea and the previous studies as well by Dr Greg Parkinson, it's been identified really that once the bird reaches point of lay, their characteristics such as body weight and feed intake are pretty well set, and they're on a set trajectory from that point. So, for example, the heavier birds or larger birds will tend to remain as the larger birds, and they'll tend to eat more food. Whereas, of course, the slightly smaller birds tend to remain slightly smaller and eat less food. As well, the heavier birds tend to be not as efficient with the usage of their feed, and then the lighter birds are more efficient. So I think what's really important is that we look at managing birds suitable for late lay or extending through to late lay from the point or the beginning of their rearing phase. We need to set them up during rearing to be ready at that point of lay, to have the appropriate characteristics to be suitable for the extended lay life and a long productive cycle. And again, really back to good quality egg shells for those eggs that have been produced in very late lay, as well as birds then that have reasonably solid health and characteristics late in lay.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the experimental design?
Okay, well, the aim with this project really is with management techniques that we're using during rearing, which are lighting program as well as regulation of feed intake. We expect from that, so we've got two lighting programs, a rapid step-down lighting program and then a more moderate or a typical lighting program for the highline brown bird, which we'll be using. and then also 3 feeding programs for these birds. So what we're aiming to do is to have one group that's ad lib fed, one group that's fed to achieve the breed standard weight of those birds for age. So we'll be weighing them regularly to check they're on target for their weight. And then another group that will be tracking along at about 88% of the breed standard weight. So they'll be lighter weight birds. So we're, of course, running these treatments both singly and then together. From those combinations of treatments during rearing, we're expecting that at the end of rearing, we'll get groups of birds that are of different characteristics, including different weights. And they'll have different habits in terms of their feed intake at that point in time. And from then on, we'll track them through to very late lay and assess their productivity, their persistency of lay, their egg size, egg mass, eggshell quality, internal egg quality, and then bird characteristics like bone characteristics, whether they're suffering from bone fractures or things like that, their liver condition, and their oviduct condition. So once we've got them through to late lay, we can then look at which birds really have performed the best across the extended laying period, and then relate that back to the tools that we use during rearing to generate birds of those characteristics.
So how many hens are you using for the research?
All up, there's 900 hens will enter the rearing phase. We've got, it's a 2x3 factorial, so 6 treatment groups. And for each treatment group, we'll have 5 pens of 30 birds each during the rearing phase. At the end of the rearing phase, we'll do sample collection on some birds from each treatment group, so we can understand their characteristics at that point. Then we'll transfer birds across here to the University of Sydney high-rise layer shed, where they'll go into individual cages. Once we come through to the laying phase, we're going to have 70 birds per treatment group running through the layer phase.
Still a lot, isn't it?
It's a good number of birds. We've sort of course, in designing the experiment, we've done the analysis to check that there's statistical robusticity, amongst that experimental design. So we can hopefully tease out where there are significant differences, and again where there aren't. So to be really able to identify which group of birds, is best for that extended layer life.
What are you hoping will be the outcomes of the research, and how do you think it will help farmers?
Yeah, so what I would like to achieve from this project is to be able to identify practical management tools that growers can use during the rearing phase to grow birds or rear birds to their characteristics at point of lay that are appropriate then for holding those birds through to extended lay. So these tools are practical, I hope, in terms of their managing the lighting system and the feeding system of the birds during the rearing phase. It also includes some flexibility, I think, in terms of I'm expecting the groups of birds will be a little bit different, of course, by the end of the rearing phase. So some growers might, prefer birds of slightly different characteristics depending on how they see things and the sort of productivity that they want. So the characteristics of the birds from each of those management programs within rearing will be available as well.
So Wendy, when does the project start?
This research project, we're scheduling to start the rearing phase in January 2021. So at the moment we're of course working through all the processes and things that we need in line to start the project then. So that will be the beginning of rearing. Rearing should then finish towards the end of May next year. Then the birds will of course move through into the laying phase, and we'll hold the birds through to 100 weeks of age.